I'm aboard, Explorers! Hi there, and welcome to Baseball by Design. I am SportsLogos.net minor league baseball correspondent Paul Caputo, broadcasting live, as always, from the Sunday Helmet Hall of Fame in my basement in Fort Collins, Colorado. This week we're going to be talking about the independent Sioux City Explorers who play in Sioux City, Iowa. Later on in this episode, I'll be speaking with Christine Bornholtz with the Lewis and Clark Interpretive Center in Sioux City. And, of course, Dan Simon will be here with one of his Studio Simon Stumper trivia questions. Right now, I am so pleased to welcome to the Baseball by Design podcast Dan Vaughn, who is the play-by-play broadcaster for the Sioux City Explorers. Dan, hello, how are you doing?
Good. Always a pleasure to jump on and talk Explorers baseball, Paul, no matter what it be logos, town, players, you name it, man. I'm fired up.
Well, let's get into to any and all of that. This is, this is a fun brand, obviously rooted in a certain amount of tradition and history here. I know that we were talking before we started recording that you are a history buff.
Yep.
So I'm going to start you with a really basic question, Dan. Why are the Sioux City Explorers called the Explorers?
Well, it honors the Lewis and Clark expedition, which did not, and this is sort of one of the mysteries of it initially, but there's a whole storyline that brings it back to Sioux City. It didn't actually begin in Sioux City. It was sort of like the last stop before they went west. The Lewis and Clark expedition beginning back east, and they were, the different various outlets of the Mississippi, the Ohio, the Missouri. They basically went up the Missouri River. They wind up down in Omaha, and they wind up losing a guy named Sergeant Floyd. And Floyd was the only casualty of the entire expedition. I mean, there was a dog they had traveled with them that traveled the whole time, all these years, with only one casualty. And Sergeant Floyd was a military, cavalryman, I guess, at the time. He passes as they're coming up the Missouri River. He passes in basically they believe pancreatitis, has a bout with that, and basically drops right there in what is now Sioux City. And there's a monument for Sergeant Floyd just up the block from the ballpark. So Lewis and Clark kind of recouped there. They sort of circle the wagons a bit. Plus, they had a lot of interaction with the Lakotas as well, who are in that Sioux land as well, which goes really from Winnipeg all the way down, all the way down to Omaha and beyond. So there's a lot of course, this is a early 1805, 1806. So there's a lot of, that's all Lakota territory. So that interaction as well. So they kind of stopped there in Sioux City. They bury Sergeant Floyd. There's a monument there for him. And that's sort of what's always been the real historical marker of Sioux City is the Sergeant Floyd Monument. That monument I actually live in the summertime in the season in a place called Sergeant Bluff, which is named after Sergeant Floyd. So you've got that connection there, and that's really where the Sioux City connection with the Lewis and Clark expedition happened. I mean, they're only halfway across the country at that time, and there's all kinds of stories and encounters they've had along the way. But really the main tragic event of the entire journey was the tragic passing, and it wasn't an arrow or anything like that. It was just a routine thing that back in 1800s would have pretty much taken down anybody, where today you don't think much about that.
The team, this franchise dates back till 1993. The current version of the branding, which is sort of an X apostrophe S, and sort of for the nickname, the X's.
Yes.
So that branding doesn't really get into the history that you're describing. Some of the prior branding, when the team was with the Northern League from 1993 to 2005, does have that sort of like illustrations of Lewis and Clark, and like gets into the sort of the westward exploration that was happening with that expedition. How well known is it among fans or in Sioux City that explorer's name is tied to the city's connection to Lewis and Clark?
I think fans who live in Sioux City, who grew up there, they all know because they saw the monument, and you can't miss it. It's right there on I-29. It's a bluff overlooking the Missouri River, which looks right back in Nebraska. If you're on the Nebraska side, you can't miss it. It's really, it's sort of a miniature Washington monument. It's that very same style, straight up kind of granite with the, where the all comes together at the point. It's very familiar looking. It's lit up you come up at nighttime, it's lit up as well. So if you grew up in Sioux City, if you're a kid that, maybe left and went the West Coast, you would remember Well, what is my hometown known for besides the rich corn history, which goes throughout Iowa, Nebraska, the Dakotas? That, but as far as just the town proper, it would be something you would know.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and the Lewis and Clark Trail goes, clear across the country, right? I mean, technically starting in Pittsburgh, going
Right,
all the way out to the mouth of the Columbia River, right? Like, so, I mean,
right.
you go clear across the country with it. To my knowledge, I don't know how many other teams are really named for, the Lewis and Clark expedition, or even for that like sort of westward expansion. You've been involved in, especially in that league and in that part of the country. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you're right on. I can't think of one. The you mentioned the old branding. The old branding we had, and there's some throwbacks we've worn before. We've got a few merch items in our team store that have the old branding, which is basically the silhouette of kind of a pioneersman, or for lack of a better word, the Davy Crockett, Daniel Boone type look with the coonskin hat, which is sort of the that's sort of the way that people vision Lewis and Clark and a lot of the pioneers of that time. This is before the maybe the Western wagons going with the cowboy hat. So that's sort of the look. I think the West Virginia Mountaineers, they're kind of that's sort of the same look that old logo we had, the original logo, which was an X with the silhouette of the pioneer coonskin cap look or whatever. But I don't know that obviously a mountaineer is a guy who lives in the mountains, and I don't know that's why the closest thing I could think of
Yeah.
to it. But as far as that, I think it's unique in our league.
Yeah.
I don't know top of my head of any ball clubs worldwide named after a couple of explorers that really explored their countryside or whatever. But that really is the name, and it's really a cool piece of history that I think, and it's really too funny. Well, I catch myself sometimes forgetting just how important the Lewis and Clark expedition was. We live in 25 where we've got it's easy to get to the West Coast or from Dallas to Denver or whatever. It's all just a snap of the fingers. Back in those days, heck, getting just to Sioux City was a big deal. You hadn't got across the country yet. So that was a huge deal to find out what was way out west. I think we sort of forget that as historical visionaries, I guess.
Yeah, it's an incredible accomplishment, that took more than just those two people, right? Like, I
Right.
mean,
Oh, yeah.
the Native American history that sort of accompanies all of that. I mean, it's an incredible story. One of the things, I mean, you mentioned some of the other teams or some of the other things that this team could have been named for. You mentioned the heritage around corn, right? Like, and you've got the Cedar Rapids Colonels, and they went that direction. Certainly, the fact that Sioux City is right there on the Missouri River, that's something that could have lent itself to a nickname. There's a lot of teams that have sort of river-based logos or nicknames. So the team choosing to focus on the history of the area rather than like a agriculture or a natural resource or something like that. Obviously, part of this team's brand, obviously the history is so important to Sioux City that this team would even choose it to base its nickname on.
Well, and when the Northern League came to Sioux City in '93, there were a lot of folks who were like going, huh, because they had not baseball in Sioux City since 1961. It'd been a
Yeah,
while.
yeah,
And there was sort of like, can it work here? Is it going to work here? That kind of thing. And if you know the history of the area back at the time, you had Gateway Computers that was doing, kind of in their growth period. There was a growth of Sioux City, but there was still a lot of would baseball work there? And I
mm,
think one of the real tricks was, rather than resurrecting an old name, or perhaps they could have used they were the original, Sioux City was the original Cornhuskers back in the 1890s and 1900s. Rather than resurrecting a name that was already out with Nebraska across the river, they rolled the dice and went with the most visible, really the most visible thing in town is that monument. Granted, you can't see it from all over town, but if you drive through town, you see it. There's a sign for there, a natural historical sign as well. I think that was a genius move because, if you're trying to make baseball work for the first time in 31 years, one of the things is to probably not go with something that people are going, well, gosh, we're going to cheer for the Cornhuskers. Well, I don't really like Cornhuskers because I'm a Hawkeye or a Cyclone. It makes
right.
perfect sense to say, okay, we're going to do something totally unique to our area, and which is really cool about our secondary logo, which is the state of Iowa with the Explorers name across it. You can throw that in there now, and you don't have any kind of confusion with, well, state of Iowa and a Cornhusker. Now it's just the X's, and it's the state of Iowa. So that also helped too. I think it's a really genius move. One of the moves that our little engine that could be like to stay on the air, that little town of Sioux City, the smallest in our league, able to flourish and continue to operate because of visionaries that decided, you know what, that's the name to use.
In minor league baseball now, I feel like you see so much in terms of branding and identities that is character based. And Sioux City has a very text based brand here. Is there a sense of like, oh, a need to try to keep up with the Joneses or to develop something more character based, or is this sort of classic, very traditional baseball identity something that the team is really going to stick with?
I think what we've done is sort of what you've seen, and if you fall into the Nippon League teams, they were very much like that initially. Japan, where I was over there last year, and I remember, being at Hiroshima, and their mascot, the Toyo carp is the actual name of the team. It sponsors Toyo, and the carp is a fish, but they don't really have a fish mascot. They got these sort of Philly fanatic looking creatures that are sort of good for the kids. Well, in the same vein, Sioux City, because we don't really have an animal, we're not a fuzzy cat or a cute little tiger or whatever it is, or some of the Winnipeg, as I used earlier, they have these a male and female cute little goldfish, and they look the part. We don't really have that. We do have slugger. Now, what we've done, this goes back to a color change. Actually, our colors, original red, which I'm wearing, got a little more maroonish red over the last few years. And we went in 2 years ago, and Tom Backmeyer, our vice president and general manager, went in, and we went back to our original branding colors. And one of the things we've incorporated, we've had Slugger as our mascot. He's been our guy. We've had him at the ballpark for years, but we didn't really have a Slugger mascot in our branding. We do have that now. So we've got, if I was to send a sponsor a logo slick, it'd have the X's logo that we just talked about, would have, some of the different color fonts, a color combination, but also would have Slugger, our mascot, and him, is official cartoonist, where before we had Slugger, but we didn't really have him in our logo. And we don't use that logo a lot, but it's there. If a sponsor was going to use that, or I want to use it for sponsorship purposes or promotional purposes, I could. And it's sort of funny because you think of the Explorer, that coonskin cap and the rifle or whatever. And it's just like I said, I was in Hiroshima last year, and I'm looking for the carp logo, and here comes this. The funny story about the sidebar of this, they were two American guys that actually do the actual mascots for this team in the Japan League,
Oh.
and they didn't look anything like a carp, but they were obviously the kids love them, and I've got they've got a secondary logo for it, which I realized after I got home from Japan, and it's sort of the same thing with us. I mean, you got to do that. I mean, not everybody can have a cute little lion, tiger, and bear. You got to sometimes be creative. We've done that with Slugger, our dog, and Lewis and Clark had a pup as well, so it makes some sense.
Oh, there you go. That's a good connection. I like that connection. We were talking before we started recording about the work that you do with the Australian Baseball League. You record a show for them, or you actually broadcast it live, and so you're working out the fancy time zones. As we were talking, I busted out my Sydney Blue Sox cap, so I am compelled, as you're talking about Japan, to bust out my Hanshin Tigers cap.
There you go. There you go. There you go.
I got that on a trip to Japan last year. Got to see some Japanese baseball, and that was an incredible experience.
Yeah, it's a really cool baseball culture there. My youngest daughter, who is teaching over there, she's used baseball as a language to communicate with a lot. She teaches English there, so she's used it a lot as she teaches English to some of her students, because they know baseball in Japan. She knows a little bit about baseball because of my work, and so it's been a nice little international exchange. But they got some cool logos and cool little things they do. And if you haven't seen a game in Japan, I recommend it highly. As you have, recommend it highly, man. That is an experience that you're just like, wait, am I at a baseball game? Wait, what is this?
Well, it's become something of a running joke with listeners of this podcast that I bring up the fact that I got to go to Japan to see a couple of Hanshin Tigers games in Osaka last year. So it's not a surprise to people who listen to this regularly that
That's awesome. I've been was in Osaka last year. They weren't playing yet. They were about 2 weeks from spring training, but I've been to the park, different parks there, and I think I was the only guy standing outside the ballpark taking a picture on a February morning, going, Most tourists go to Osaka Castle. This guy's standing outside the ballpark. What's he
Right,
doing?
right, right. No, no, no. You and I, we could travel together, I think. All right. Well, Dan, I'll get you out of here on this. We've talked about the brand. We've talked about Sioux City. You've been broadcasting for the team for a few years. If folks are going to go to a game in Sioux City, what is that experience? When they're there at the ballpark, what's unique about the ballpark? What should they look for?
You're going to have a bit of a throwback to the minor leagues 25 years ago, I think, because it is everybody knows your name. We're a small market. We play in a league with some, Chicago and Milwaukee's and Cleveland, which is out of Fort Worth and Winnipeg. Some of these are major league cities with many major league ballparks and bells and whistles. We don't have all the bells and whistles necessarily, but you're going to have a throwback to when, if you watched the Midwest League back in, say, the 80s or 90s, or maybe you were a Southern League fan back in the day and you'd gone to a game in Knoxville or something maybe years ago, you're going to have a throwback, or maybe Sally League. It's going to feel a little bit more homey, less corporate, more homey, which I think is what we do. We are a smaller market. We're not Chicago. We're not sitting outside of O'Hare Airport with, 787s flying over. We are Sioux City, Iowa. And then we don't try to be something we're not. You're going to feel welcome. You're going to feel a part of things. What's great about our ballpark, the way it sits, and back in '93 it was built in such a way that there's no bad seat in the place. You don't have any obstructed view. It's not covered, but there's no obstructed view. You can be in the top row and still probably hear the manager. Even the place is full, you can hear the manager shout at the pitcher. And if God forbid the bench is clear, you're going to get a great view of that as well. But you're going to get entertained, great music, have great food. If you've ever had, we've got phenomenal brats. I'll tell you that our brats are,
Oh
are,
boy.
are locally made. If you like the Midwest style brat, you're going to love that as well. Just that is the feel. You're going to have a hometown feel to it. And I'd love to have folks come out. And if you're going up 29, or you're on your way to Mount Rushmore, or you're just making a summer's drive, it's a great place to swing by for a nice summer evening. The weather in Iowa, yes, it gets hot, but it never gets like, it's not the service of the sun hot. And it's a great, great atmosphere. It's Americana. Sioux City, Iowa is Americana, man.
So I do have a story to tell about the weather in Iowa because as soon as you started saying that, it definitely rang true. I do a baseball road trip with college buddies every year. It's called Baseball Palooza. We do 4 minor league games in 4 days over sometime in the summer, usually in August. And the closest we've ever come to a game just getting straight up rained out and them not taking the field at all was in Cedar Rapids, where we drove through torrential, cold downpours all the way, across the state of Iowa to get to Cedar Rapids. And we get there to the ballpark. The skies are pitch dark. It's freezing, right? Like, and I'm traveling with shorts and a t-shirt. I go into the team store and I buy a hoodie because it's that cold. Sure enough, they pull the tarp off. They're starting the game, and and I'm sitting there and I'm shivering. And then all of a sudden, it's the third inning, and someone has flipped a switch, and it is muggy. It is 90 degrees, and I am sweating my tail off in this Cedar Rapids Colonels hoodie that I had.
There's no doubt, Paul. My home in Dallas Fort Worth, which right now is 26 degrees here, but in general, Texas in the summer, in
Yeah.
July, it's triple digits. We're in that stretch of 50 days of 100 degrees or whatever, and all that. And my wife spends, she's a school teacher, so she comes up to Sioux City, and she's told this story. The last 2 summers, she's come unprepared during 4th of July week. She shows up and she's in shorts and a t-shirt, and all of a sudden the sun goes down on 4th of July, and she needs pants and a hoodie, and she's had to go make Target runs and to our team store to get a hoodie because she comes prepared for the Texas summer. And that sun goes down, it can be nice and breezy
Oh yeah.
there in the Siouxland. So yes, that's not uncommon. We have sometimes 3 seasons in
Yeah.
one day, so it can happen, man. It can happen.
Well, as we're telling these stories, I'm looking out my window at a bunch of snow, and it's been negative temperatures here in Colorado today. So I know there's a cold front at the time of this recording sweeping across the nation. I'm sure you're dealing with it too.
Yeah,
So,
I'll leave it. I'll leave it this too. Yesterday, my show in Australia is called Baseball's Best Mate, and my broadcast partner Paul Morgan. We did our show yesterday, which was Monday morning's edition over there. I was sitting here in my studio last night and about to go outside for dinner, and it was going to be 20 to 28 degrees. He was at a breakfast function at City Beach in Perth, and it is just around 89 degrees. It was going to be 100 that day, and he is behind me or behind him He's standing there doing the show with me. Is the beach, and people are walking doing the morning jog with their shorts, and it's here people with their towels getting ready to go to the beach that day. I mean, it's literally summer in Australia, and
Uh,
and here I am just like it's like we're but amazing now. And if Lewis and Clark can see us now, right? I mean, they'd be going like, how what kind of
right.
world are we living in?
It's that what an incredible thought to end on, Dan. That's and so unfair that there are people in Australia swimming in beaches right now. It's it's really something. Dan, where can people find the work that you do? Where can people find you on social media? Where can people find the Explorers online?
Absolutely. We're xsbaseball.com. That's you can also just do a Sioux City Explorers. Our website comes up, but xsbaseball.com. We're got a huge X following there as well. We also have a Facebook page, which has all of our live content. Our website. We're also on got some TikTok work, some Instagram as well. You can follow me on X at Dan Vaughn. That's VAUGHANJR as a junior, Dan Vaughn Jr. on X, or if you want to do a little Australia talk, you can follow at Baseball's Best Mate, or if you type in TBA Australia, that'll come up as well. But Baseball's Best Mate, or one of the two. But love to have it. We have a Facebook page as well for our live show, so it's a little cross content. But Sioux City Explorers, we're all active on social media. We do a show every 2 weeks, every Wednesday on Facebook Live. We have a player or manager or somebody chat about the X's, and we stay very engaged in the off season. Those shows are also on podcast wherever you get your podcasts. That's called Explorers Expresso. So that's we got that going for you as well. So plenty of things with the Sioux City Explorers.
All sorts of stuff going on. I'll throw as much of that as I can into the show notes so that people can just go click on some links.
Thank you.
And then Dan, hope to catch you at a ball game for a classic minor league experience in Sioux City, Iowa. I really appreciate it.
Hey, Paul, thanks a lot. I always love talking X's, and looking forward to hearing your work going forward. Thanks, mate.
Thank you. All right, everyone, welcome back. I am so pleased to have Christine Bornholtz, who is the Assistant Executive Director with the Lewis and Clark Interpretive Center in Sioux City, Iowa, the very same Sioux City. Christine, good morning. How are you doing?
I'm great, thank you.
Let's jump right into this. Why would a baseball team in Sioux City, Iowa be named after something to do with Lewis and Clark? Why are Lewis and Clark so important to this city?
So Sioux City is on the Lewis and Clark expedition on the Missouri River. And the reason that we are so important is this is where, only about 3 months after they started the expedition, this is where their only death of the expedition was Sergeant Charles Floyd, and he died here in Sioux City, in the Sioux City area. Obviously, we didn't exist yet.
That fact is actually, I mean, it's really surprising to hear that, right? Like you would think that an expedition that lasted as long as it did in unfamiliar territory for those individuals, with the number of things that could cause illness, infection, attacks by animals, all those things. It's super surprising that only one person died during the course of that expedition. Do you all get into sort of an explanation for that? It's sort of not just that you had the only death, but how come there weren't more?
So that's the interesting thing, is that Sergeant Floyd was only 21 years old. And like I said, this was at, the first few months of the expedition. And they gave, medicine in 1804 was much different. And so they didn't know what was wrong with him. He just had stomach pains. And so they gave him some medication they called Thunderbolts that really was just kind of antacid thing but they used it for everything, hoping that would help. And so they gave it to him, and within like hours, he passed away. And so we know now that he really died of appendicitis.
Oh.
And so they didn't know what that was. They didn't know he had that. So it was really strange. And it's amazing that he's the only one who died. There were many people who got shot because of mishaps, usually involving whiskey and at night while they were dancing around. And then there were definitely animal attacks. There were bear attacks and things like that. But he's the only one who passed on the whole expedition.
The sort of writ large for the country, for the United States of America, the the Lewis and Clark expedition obviously is extremely important in terms of the European colonizers who were here and expanded westward. That expedition, just outside the city of Sioux City, it was several thousand miles that they covered and pretty amazing journey that they took. What's the significance of Lewis and Clark in general to the United States of America?
Well, so, once President Jefferson, he became president in 1801. And so then by 1803, he sends a message to Congress saying, hey, I really want to do this expedition. We need to know what's out there. Jefferson really wanted them to explore the unknown and he was really interested in nature and the ecology of it all. And Jefferson thought he might send Lewis and Clark out and they would find woolly mammoths. I mean, that's the area that we were, that's what they're starting with, is maybe we'll go find woolly mammoths, which obviously they did not. But so it's the expansion of the West. They made over 100 different maps while they were on the expedition. And, this is really right after Louisiana Purchase. And so trying to see what's out there and get all the way to the Pacific was really the goal, and impressive, I think.
When visitors come to the Lewis and Clark Interpretive Center in Sioux City, what are they most surprised by? What's something that, an amateur history enthusiast might show up at the museum and you're like, yeah, you think you might know this, but check this out.
Well, so again, because we focus a lot on Sergeant Floyd, so a lot of people have questions, and we always tell them that he's the only one who died. That's surprising. One of the things that I think is surprising as well is because they were looking for, animals, they were collecting, I think they collected over 172 different samples and animals and things like that. So one of the things that happened is there was a day, it was in August, I think of 1804, and they were here near Sioux City. I believe it's Homer, Nebraska. And they were going out fishing to get all of the food that they needed for the trip. And in a day and a half, they caught 1,100 fish. In a day and a half. Yeah, that's very surprising. There was one slave, York. He was able to carry a weapon. He's the only slave that was ever able to carry a weapon on the expedition, and they trusted him. They really trusted him. His name was York. So people are surprised by that. I think that how Floyd is here now. So now we have a monument here, and it looks like the Washington Monument, only smaller. And actually, we had our monument first. Sacagawea was never here. That's the other thing that was really surprising to them. She didn't join the expedition until they were up in North Dakota. And she actually joined because her husband was a French-Canadian fur trapper. And so she was with her husband. And then they found that when she was tagging along, they found that, oh, she's really helpful. We could really use her. And so she became more important than her husband. So people are surprised to know that Sacagawea was never in the first part of the expedition. So another thing that might be interesting is when Sergeant Floyd died, he was only 21 years old. So if you think that the average minor league baseball player is about 23 to 25 years old, and Sergeant Floyd was only 21 when he passed. And I can tell you that Meriwether Lewis was 29 and Clark was 33. So they're set out from Thomas Jefferson on this expansion, the Corps of Discovery, they called it. And they're only 29, 33. They're young, so people always think of historical figures as being, 50, 60. I always think of it that way. And so the fact that they were so young and they're doing this expedition is incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. Like sometimes when I look around the room and I'm waiting for the grown-ups to show up, I realize, oh, wait a minute, I'm the grown-up.
That's exactly right. You always think, oh, I think I'm an adult now.
Yeah. So this Explorers team, their logo right now is just the letter X apostrophe S, the X's, and then there's a baseball going through it. And so if you're not familiar with the history of Sioux City, you might not know that it's a reference to the Explorers is a reference to
Mhm.
Lewis and Clark. They did have a previous logo that had these sort of Explorer style, Lewis and Clark style characters. And I'm curious how well we know what Lewis and Clark actually look like. Like, obviously, there are paintings. There are baseball teams that have historical figures as caricatures. You've got Teddy Roosevelt with the Frisco Rough Riders. You've got
Mm.
George and Mary Washington with the Fred Nats. Could you envision a time when maybe, or do we know enough about what Lewis and Clark actually look like that we might have like a caricature of Lewis and Clark as the logo?
Well, so that's interesting because the first logo that they made had a frontiersman on there.
Hmm.
So it was a frontiersman holding a baseball bat, and then it said Explorers. But Lewis and Clark, while they were here, never actually wore frontiersman, like the fur trader kind of clothes. The whole time they were in our area, they were still wearing their military uniforms on the expedition. So they didn't look like frontiersmen. They looked like military because it was a military envoy. The other thing is that Lewis and Clark look very, very, very similar. It's hard to even tell them apart. We have animatronics here at the center. We have a Thomas Jefferson who moves and talks. We have Sergeant Floyd. We have Lewis and Clark, and then we have York. And Lewis and Clark look almost identical. And so if you look at their paintings, it's the pictures of them, it's really hard to tell them apart. They wore different colored buttons, though. Lewis wore gold and Clark wore silver. So that's how you can tell them apart.
Well, I feel like this is an opportunity now for the team to have gold and silver buttons, and you have to,
Ooh.
yeah, choose Team Lewis or Team Clark here.
Or
Um,
gold and silver bats. They could start using gold and silver.
See, I
That
like
probably
that
won't
too.
go over. Yeah.
They could paint them. I've been to the Louisville Slugger Museum, and they paint bats all sorts of different colors there. Another thing that happens with baseball teams these days is they have bat dogs who will run out and grab the bat, after the batter runs to first base. One of the exhibits, I was noodling around on your website and I was looking at your exhibits, and one of the exhibits that you have, and you'll have to correct me here, it's spelled like it would be Seaman, or maybe Shaman, the Newfoundland dog.
It is Seaman. Yep, we
Seaman.
do have that. He's an animatronic as well. He barks all day long.
Is that a
Yeah, he's really interesting. They could have used him for the mascot. He's a huge Newfoundlander. He was Lewis's dog all along. And he actually saved them several times. Like a bear was chasing Clark and Lewis up, and killed the bear and saved them. So, Seaman the dog was a very, very important part of the expedition. So they could use the dog Seaman as the logo. It would be, or the mascot. That would be good too.
I hope that the team is listening to this episode right now because a great big Newfoundland dog as an alternate logo, that is just full of possibilities right there. So like the the Sioux City Seamans, the Sioux City Newfoundlands, something. There's some sort of possibility there.
Well, and it would be great if they could train the dog to get the bats, like you said, other teams do. I would love to see dogs running out and collecting the bats after they hit.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, yeah, the bat dogs are so much fun. Christine, I have one more question before I let you get out of here because I want to talk to you about the interpretive center itself. And as I mentioned, I was noodling around on the website looking at the different exhibits. One of the tenets of good interpretation is telling stories from multiple perspectives, and it looks like, from what I'm seeing on your website, is that you've got the Thomas Jefferson, and you've got the perspectives from Lewis and Clark taken from their journals. You have the perspective of an enslaved person through York. Obviously, there are Native American aspects to this story. There's the natural world. How do you, at your interpretive center, what's your sort of mission, your goal for telling this story, and how do you represent all of those different perspectives when you tell this story?
So I think the animatronics, like you just mentioned, really help. You're interacting with them really because I can tell you that Thomas Jefferson looks very real and alive, and he moves all day on his own, like even when he's not talking. So it really gives you the feeling that you're talking, you're listening to them specifically. And again, the Sioux City area, we have a strong Native American background and relationship. And so we tell the story from that perspective as well. A lot of times, I think on the Lewis and Clark, they spend a lot of time just talking about Lewis and Clark based on their journals and things like that. And so we really try to include the Native American perspective, and the perspective of the actual soldiers, and we really want you to be able to feel immersed in the tour through our exhibits and we want you to feel like we have a theater that feels like you're inside of the keelboat. And so we're trying to really have you feel like you're immersed in what might have been the expedition.
All right, Christine, I lied. I actually do have one last question for you because we were talking off air before the interview that you're a big baseball fan. So before I let you go, what's your team? Any predictions for the 2025 season? Yeah.
Oh, well, so I'm a Cubs fan.
All right.
We also have the Iowa Cubs, our minor league team down in Des Moines. But I'm a Cubs fan through and through, die hard. It's passed on through the family, as many team loyalties are.
Absolutely.
My prediction is that I want them to go all the way, but they start strong and, every season. As a Cubs fan, you really learn to not get your hopes up too much, but I support them solidly, and I feel like it's going to be a good year.
I am familiar with that phenomenon, and I've seen some predictions for the Cubs to do well this year, at least in the National League Central. So I saw at least one prediction that had them winning the National League Central. As a Philadelphia sports fan, I am used to getting my hopes up. So
Yeah, Oh, so Philadelphia, so like the Eagles, so
yeah.
not the Kansas City Chiefs, which are also in our area. So yeah.
Well, I can't imagine that you would be a Kansas City fan and a Chicago fan at the same time, but
well, it's weird, yeah. Really, I just love the Cubs. They're my number one team for everything. So
all right. Well, best of luck in the upcoming baseball season.
thank you.
The website for the Sioux City Lewis and Clark Interpretive Center is siouxcitylcic.com. It's a .com, even though it's a 501c3 nonprofit, so it is a nonprofit organization, and it looks like the exhibits are super cool. So when you go check out an Explorers game, go see the Lewis and Clark Interpretive Center. Where can people find you all on social media?
So we are mainly Facebook is our main social media platform right now.
Christine, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right, everyone, welcome back. It is time once again for Studio Simon Stumpers, the weekly trivia question brought to us by Dan Simon of the Louisville-based design firm Studio Simon, responsible for so many of minor league baseball's greatest logos and nicknames. Dan, good morning. Hello, how are you?
Good morning to you, Paul. I am fantastic. Thank you. How are you there in Fort Collins, Colorado?
It was a balmy 29 degrees for my morning run this morning. I was overdressed for it, which has not been the case in recent weeks here in Colorado. And speaking of warm weather, Dan, we are with this episode into Major League Baseball's spring training. Baseball is back in our lives. It is a glorious, beautiful thing. It's something I literally count the days to every single offseason. Glad to have baseball back.
Four of the most beloved words for baseball fans: pitchers and catchers report.
Dan, are you ready for my contrarian hot take on this?
I'm sure I am ready. I'm very curious what could be a hot take and contrarian hot take about those four words. Is that what you're going to talk about?
Yeah. I have a Facebook page called Countdown to Spring Training, in which I count down to the first games of spring training baseball. And people say, how come you don't count down to pitchers and catchers reporting? And my reason for that is, I think that pitchers and catchers reporting, it's a little bit hard to pin down. Like the dates are not like published that early on. So you can't really, it's hard to count down to it. They sort of change. A lot of the pitchers and catchers are there like in January, right? Like they're there already anyway on pitchers and catchers report day. And it's largely ceremonial to me, right? Like I don't actually feel like I get baseball back in any real way until I can start seeing highlights and box scores and games on the radio or on the MLB network or something like that. So pitchers and catchers reporting, I get it. I'm not trying to yuck anyone's yum, but it feels largely sort of overblown and ceremonial to me, and I am much happier about actual baseball games starting than I am, with pitchers and catchers reporting.
Paul, you and I have known each other
Yeah,
for actually many years at this point.
yeah.
And it was not until just now that I realized what a deeply angry man you are.
You can see the white hot rage in my eyes right now, can't you?
It's both startling and scary.
Yeah.
Um, but hey, let's bring you back down and calm things down. How about we do a stumper?
Let's do a Studio Simon Stumper, this time about the Sioux City Explorers, who are a a Lewis and Clark themed nickname. And we had a little at one point during this episode, we were chatting about like, are there other teams named for the Lewis and Clark expedition? And the closest we could come was your Great Falls Voyagers, who, while they have an alien theme and are tied to the famous Mariana incident, the UFO incident there. Also, the double entendre for that name is the Voyageurs, who did the exploring across the upper Midwest. And so, not explicitly Lewis and Clark, but that's the closest we could come to thinking of a team named for Lewis and Clark out there in the world.
Well, the name of the team was not originally supposed to be the Great Falls Voyagers. It was supposed to be the Great Falls Skeeters. And that came directly from either Lewis or Clark's journal about their voyage of discovery when they had stopped in Great Falls for about a month, I believe, because they had a portage around the falls, and it apparently portaging took them a long time for, I don't know why, but they stayed in Great Falls for a spell. And whoever's journal it was writing about the skeeters that were eating them alive practically. That's, I don't know, those were not necessarily his words, but and the brand identity had been completely done in the can, ready to go. And then they learned that there was a term that younger people use for the word skeeters that was not what it was a dirty reference.
They found it on Urban Dictionary.
Yes. And so anyway, they were supposed to be called the Great Falls Skeeters. And then as the story goes, you later had the Sugarland Skeeters who named themselves the Skeeters, and nobody cried foul about that name. And so,
Yeah.
but I'm glad they went with Voyagers anyway. I really liked the way that identity came out, and they're still using it to this day. And so,
If I recall, you shared that logo with me, and we put it out there on social media. This was May of 2023 that we did the Voyagers episode, and that's one I know we've said in the past. Like sometimes you've done logos and they don't see the light of day, and you hang on to them and you don't put them out there on social media in case you might want to use them. But this team would have been the Skeeters before Sugarland was the Skeeters, and the logo that you created first before the Sugarland Skeeters came into existence looked so much like what they ended up with, or there were so many similarities anyway to the logo that Sugarland ended up going with. It probably sort of rendered that Skeeters logo that you designed for Great Falls kind of useless. And you did not do the Sugarland one.
no, that's a grandiose identity. And they never saw my identity because it was never made public
Yeah.
until you posted that when we talked about it. I didn't remember that you posted it, but it's coming back to me now. So yeah, just coincidence, but
Yeah. That's an example of convergent logo evolution.
yeah. So, but we're not talking about the Great Falls Voyagers
No.
here. We're talking about the Sioux City Explorers. Now, I do not know, as I've mentioned before, I'm not privy to your discussions with your other guests prior to me doing my Stumper segment. So I don't know if you discussed this. Did you at all discuss that the Sioux City Explorers were one of the 6 charter members of the Independent Northern League back in 1993?
No, we didn't get into that.
Okay. Well, for those listeners who do not know, and even for those listeners who do know, I'm going to tell you this anyway. The Northern League was started by a gentleman named Miles Wolff, who was the owner of Baseball America magazine, as well as owner of various minor league teams. He is a basically, if there was a minor league baseball Hall of Fame that inducted not just players, but owners and other people in front offices, he would be definitely a first ballot minor league baseball Hall of Fame. And the formation of the Northern League was actually a big deal. I don't know if they knew it at the time that it was going to be a big deal, but it opened at the time the Northern League had its inaugural season in 1993. There wasn't independent baseball back then. There was just affiliated minor league baseball, that is. And they started this independent league, which I don't know if I'm sure they hoped it would be successful, but I don't know that the odds of it being successful were great, because think about it, when everything was affiliated baseball back then, who would want to see baseball played by players who were not minor leaguers of major league teams? But it turned out to be a success. That league lasted until 2009, but it opened the floodgates for other independent minor leagues, a lot of which have come and gone. But think about today, how many different independent minor leagues there are, all because of the Northern League. So the Northern League was a big deal, and it was a big deal that the Sioux City Explorers were one of the inaugural teams.
It's interesting that you would say that about the fans wanting to see affiliated teams because they want to see, the players who are in the system for these major league players. That is kind of a prevailing sentiment with my Baseball Palooza guys. And I find myself advocating for independent baseball sometimes, because I'm the person who comes up with the schedule, and, they're yelling at me because, like, oh, we got to drive 5 hours this day. And I'm like, well, because you guys won't go to independent games. So this year, for scheduling reasons, I finally got them to agree to go to an independent game. We've been to a couple over the years. We went to a Chicago Dogs game once in their inaugural season. And then we went to a Kansas City Monarchs game after that team had rebranded from the T-Bones. But just this year, Dan, we were this coming year, we were trying to decide where Baseball Palooza was going to go, and we were looking at various schedules. And it is looking for all the world as though your Joliet Slammers will be on the list this year for Baseball Palooza. And that is a rare occurrence for us to go to an independent team like the Joliet Slammers.
I should drive up there and go to that game with you, because I've I've created that identity. I love that brand identity, and I really, but I've never been to a game. I need to see them. I need to get myself some Joliet Slammers gear. And by the way, I love independent minor league baseball. I love collegiate summer league baseball. So when I said what I said about, like, who wants to see baseball played by players who are not on a team affiliated with a major league club, I want to see baseball like that. I don't care. I don't care who it's played by. And I've been to college games. I go to high school games. I All baseball is good. So and thanks to the Northern League, we now have all these independent leagues. So let's get back to our studio Simon Stumper about that. So the Sioux City Explorers started in the Northern League. They now play in the American Association of Professional Baseball, as it's called. And so our studio Simon Stumper today asks, which of these current American Association teams was also a charter member of the Northern League? Was it A, the Sioux Falls Canaries, B, the Winnipeg Goldeyes, or C, the Fargo Moorhead Redhawks?
We've had a couple of recent stumpers where I've just actually known the answer or been able to take a very highly educated guess based on actual knowledge. This is one where I am going to be straight up guessing.
Let me just mention one thing,
Okay.
not to try to confuse you or give you too much to think about, but in fairness, I want to say this. All three of these teams were Northern League teams, but only one of them was a charter member. And they were all Northern League teams around, even though only one was a charter member, they were all Northern League teams around, they started around the same time. So I happen to have known this because I remember when the Northern League started. Actually, the Northern League started, interestingly enough, in the same year that I did my first sports branding project, and my second sports branding project was for a Northern League team, the St. Paul Saints. So, I remember the Northern League well, and I remember, so I knew this one, but I'm a little bit older than you, so maybe it wasn't top of mind. You were alive, but you weren't thinking probably a lot about sports branding back then. So
No, and I very limited minor league baseball experience at that point. In the 90s, I had gone to some Richmond Braves games. In 1994, I went to a Camden River Sharks game during the Major League Baseball strike. It wasn't really till the early 2000s that I really started getting into to minor league baseball. Dan, what year was that first brand of yours?
1993.
1993. I have the year 1993 in my brain associated with the Winnipeg Goldeyes. That team may have been founded in a different league and then moved into the Northern League. I'm going to say not the Sioux Falls Canaries because they already had the Sioux City Explorers. So they wouldn't need the Sioux Falls Canaries. Come on, it's too many Sioux. I just have in my brain an association of the Winnipeg Goldeyes with 1993. And so, therefore, with the limited amount of sussing that I could do to answer this question, I am going to go Winnipeg Goldeyes.
Okay.
Oh, boy.
You know what? When I did this question, that was not the answer. But I think maybe due to a technicality, the way you were sussing that out, you said something that made me think it's kind of a technicality. So I'm going to say you are correct by technicality. So let's talk about that.
Partial credit. I don't think this has ever happened before.
Yeah. I think I got to give you that one. Okay, because after that inaugural season, one of the charter members, the Rochester Aces, who actually had the second best record in the league in that inaugural season, but they struggled at the gate. So they were sold and moved to Winnipeg, where they became the Winnipeg Goldeyes. So technically, the Winnipeg Goldeyes were a charter member, but not as the Winnipeg Goldeyes,
So
as the Rochester
franchise was. Okay.
Okay,
All right.
so I'm gonna give you this one, and your streak, which is at least three straight, if not more, continues. What otherwise would have been the correct answer is the team that you immediately dismissed under the opinion that it would have made too many Sioux.
Too many Sioux.
The Sioux Falls Canaries were indeed a charter member. The Fargo Moorhead Redhawks, the Northern League's first expansion came in 1996.
Okay.
And they were one of two expansion teams in 1996. Now, by the way, getting back to the Winnipeg Goldeyes, do you know that for 3 seasons, 2010 through 2012, they played as the Sioux Falls Fighting Pheasants before changing their name back to the Sioux Falls Canaries?
I thought we were talking about the Winnipeg Goldeyes, and I was going to say I did not know that. And I was embarrassed not to know that because I've done an episode on the Winnipeg Goldeyes, but we're talking about the Sioux Falls Canaries, and I've not covered the Canaries yet on an episode, though I would like to. So I did not know that, and that's something that I would like to get into at some point with the Sioux Falls Canaries.
You have not done an episode with the Sioux Falls Canaries, but you have done an episode of a team whose logo features a canary.
The Dirty Birds
Yes, sir.
of Charleston.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
So
that's
there
a
you
fun one.
have. Hey, you know what? I didn't even realize it, but oh no, I was going to say all of the teams we just talked about are bird-themed identities, but no, the Goldeyes are obviously not. They're a fish. So
It would have given me the occasion to say "Go Birds."
yeah, we can date ourselves now. This stumper is being recorded a week and a half before your birds are going to try to win their second Super Bowl.
Second ever.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now you can say,
Go Birds.
yes, there you
Go
go.
Birds. So that sort of upends our whole conversation at the beginning of this, where we were pretending that it was already spring training season, and you accused me of being angry because I don't care about pitchers and catchers reporting.
Well, you can just edit this out then.
Dan, this is always fun. Thank you so much, as always. And hey, we'll talk again soon, probably around 1 week from now.
I'll see you next week.